Hello, hi everybody. Welcome to our month of May Partner Pre-Sales Enablement session. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Tammy from the Partner Enablement team. Together with me today is James Lee, our Account Technology Strategist. And today our topic will be talking about NetScaler. In particularly, we are going into ADC and we will be showcasing some of the use case. How are you going to do some sizing, some demo, and then some latest update on and a recap on ADC. So we will keep the questions towards the end of the session. And we will be answering the questions in the Q&A panel. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in, and we will attend to that at the end of the session. So now I'll pass over to James. James, over to you.
Thank you, Kemi. A very good morning and good afternoon, or even good evening, depending on which part of the world you are dialing in from. My name is James Lee. I'm Account Technology Strategist. I'm based in Singapore. It's my privilege today to walk you through the NetScaler's pre-sales enablement session that we have installed for you today. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is the brief agenda that we have put up for you guys today. So we're going to be covering NetScaler updates, some of the use cases that you can actually pitch to your customer. There's also some thoughts around what are the discovery questions and requirements gathering that you can actually find out from your customer in those sessions that you're meeting. And the solution architecture as well as sizing, bill of materials will also be covered. And lastly is also some of the very useful URLs or websites that we put together for tools and references, which you can take it with you after the session is over. All right, so let's get started with our update this day. So just a brief recap, right, to NetScaler for those of you who are still new to NetScaler, or for those of you who have already been familiar with NetScaler. This is more like a revision, but this has been a very exciting 20 over years journey. As you can see, right, the product NetScaler has been around the market. We started off in year 2001, right, by being the first ADC, right, to come out with a single pass technology, right, with our performance based on Intel chips, okay. And in 2009, NetScaler became the first multi-core technology, right, for performance scaling. In fact, that year, I still recall vividly, we actually launched the NetScaler N-Core architecture, all right, technology, further boosting our performance in the arena. Right, in 2010, we released in the market, right, the first NetScaler virtual appliance, right? We call it the VPX platform, which allows customers to run it on hypervisors, right? And even in various clouds, public clouds. And in 2015, okay, we again is the first in the ADC industry to release the NetScaler containers, right? In the form of a CPX platform, microservices deployment. And in 2016, again, NetScaler is the first ADC to actually come out with the pooled capacity licensing for flexibility, which we will talk about later in the next few slides, right? And in 2017, we launched, right, the first cloud-based ADC management offering in the form of our ADM cloud services, okay? And in 2019, again, NetScaler is the first ADC company, right, to actually release what we call a bare metal platform, right, which is our BLX platform. And in 2021, right, we actually are the first in the ADC market to release our intent-based ADC service, which customers can subscribe right today. So let's get on to the next slide. So as you can see, right, NetScaler has been powering many of the top businesses in the world every day. As you can see on these slides, I'm not going to be reading through every industry, but as you can see, right, now today, if you own an Apple a smart device, right, and every time you speak to Siri, when you say, hey Siri, all right, that request actually powers through NetScaler, right? And in fact, if you will go down to Amazon or eBay and do a transaction and when you're buying something, when you're browsing, right, that request goes through a NetScaler, right? So as you can see, right, NetScaler is really powering a lot of traffic in today's internet world, and we will go on to say as much as 75% of the internet users go through NetScaler every day. Now, a big recap on the NetScaler portfolio. What is the unique strength of the NetScaler product in the ADC market? Right? I would go on to say that it is our single software code-based technology. Now, our decision to partner with Intel, right, actually pays off hugely over the last 20 over years, because it allows us to actually release and come out with our codes, right, that can run on various different kind of platforms based on a single firmware. Okay, as you can see, right, from the left to the right, our firmware works on virtual appliances in VPX. Our same firmware can also run in the major public clouds like Azure, AWS, and GCP. We also run the same firmware on containers platform, meaning our CPX appliances. We can use the same firmware, right, to run on bare metal platforms, right, which we call BLX, right? And of course, the traditional hardware appliances, which many of our customers has been using, which is our MPX hardware, the single instance hardware appliances, and of course, not forgetting our still very popular multi-tenant SDX, multi-tenant hardware platform. Now, regardless of whichever platform the customer chooses, right, this NetScaler, our NetScaler firmware is a single software code base, and it unpacks a lot of features and functionalities, right? Especially around the security arena as well, right? Which you can see on the top right upper corner, right? Covering WAF, botnet, API protection, and so forth, which we'll talk about later as well. Okay. Now today, if you were to sit in front of a customer and you were to speak to them, and after understanding their requirements, right, you'll probably need to think about what kind of licensing are you going to be positioning to the customer, right? In the past, where everything is just perpetual, right, it's very straightforward, right? This is the appliance that you need, how many boxes that you need, there you go. But today, as you can see, right, we have opened up to subscription licensing, all right? And in fact, we have already moved away from perpetual licensing. So it's time, right? All of us need to be familiar with the various subscription licenses that's actually available on NetScaler today. Now, these are the three subscription licenses that we will briefly talk about. The first of all is the pool capacity subscription. Okay. The second is the fixed capacity subscription, which you can apply to virtual appliances like VPX and BLX. And the third form is the newly released, what we call the new fixed throughput or fixed capacity term subscription, purely for the hardware appliances like MPX and SDX, right? Targeting customers, right, who are very used to the perpetual world, right? And yet do not require the kind of flexibility which pool capacity offers, right? They could pretty well, enjoy getting onto the new fixed capacity term subscription. All right. So let's look at the pool capacity licensing. This is nothing new, right? Knowing the fact that we have been over the past few years, right, have already been pitching pool capacity licensing. But again, I want to stress that not many customers may be aware of the benefits of pool capacity. And in fact, I would go on to even say not all our partners know how to pitch or sell the benefits of pool capacity licensing. Now, what is pool capacity all about? Now, if you look at this slide, right, this is something that is very, very powerful, especially if you are facing customers, right, that has multiple appliances requirements. Now, instead of getting them to buy a fixed capacity subscription on the appliances, right, there may be a scenario where more benefits can be positioned, right, for the customer by consolidating all the capacity onto a single pool and then allocating from that pool, right, to the various NetScaler assets, right, that the customer are going to be deploying, and then thereby making that capacity flexible, right, in shifting wherever the demands require. So that is the main idea for pool capacity licensing. If you ask me what is the first most important use cases, I would immediately thought about customers today who are having situations in like hybrid multi-cloud. This is definitely something very, very useful for them. Okay, so in a pool capacity subscription license scenario, now the customer will first of all, right, make note how many appliances do they require. Okay, it could be physical, NPX or SDX, right? It could be virtual, all right, how many virtual instance require. And then you got to do some max, right, for them, right, to figure out how many, what is the total capacity that's required out of this entire fleet. So the subscription, right, comes in the form of it could be in the form of the instances, if it's SDX or VPX, all right, and then it will also encompasses the throughput capacity. So if in this slide, you can see this customer owns a 300 Gbps pool capacity, which is managed on the ADM, all right, and the customers may be deploying physical appliances today. Imagine that they will go on and buy SDX appliances, for example, that they deploy on-prem, and subsequently, all right, they can actually allocate all of this bandwidth pool of 300 Gbps. They can probably allocate 200 Gbps to on-prem, and then if they have workloads, right, in a cloud as well, they can allocate 50 Gbps, for example, and still have 50 Gbps in the pool remaining. Now, over the years, right, the customer may have a strategy, right, that is, he may be adopting a hybrid multi-cloud strategy where subsequently more and more capacity, right, will be required to be transferred to the cloud because applications are moving to the cloud gradually. So the ADCs will have to, of course, follow as well. So this kind of use cases, right, is very powerful because the customers can then allocate and free up the capacity as well as even like virtual instances license that they own in the pool and just push it to the cloud, reducing the on-prem workloads or throughput capacity consumption and moving it and reshifting, right, the consumption, right, to the cloud. So this is a very, very powerful use case. I recall, right, a situation sometime back where we were sitting down in front. I remember that the situation where we were trying to sell to a customer, right, who's doing a tech refresh on their existing SDX appliances. I remember that correctly, right? And the customer was actually having a hard time and telling us that they are finding it very difficult to justify to their procurement team, right, on doing a tech refresh of the existing SDX appliances with another two SDX new model, right, the 16,000 series, right, taking into the fact that their business model is actually going to be gradually migrating some of the workload applications, right, from on-prem to the cloud. Not all applications, but at least up to like 50 or gradually 70, 80%, right, it's going to be moved to the cloud. And they basically tell us, right, James, my procurement basically, throw my proposal out of the box, out of the window, because they said, how can you justify, buying another two huge appliances and deploying on-prem when you know that, over the next 5 years, you're going to be moving your workloads to the cloud? It basically can't justify itself, right? So instead of using the perpetual licensing, in this case, right, pool capacity is a perfect fit, right? So when we propose pool capacity, the customer immediately sees the value, right? He immediately sees the value because, right, with pool capacity, right, this customer, right, can basically use the ADM pool capacity and adjust, right, the licenses, right, and onboard the licenses as in terms of the VPX instance license as well as the VPS capacity licenses, and gradually, right, move those instances, right, to the cloud as and when, right, when their workloads are migrating from on-prem to the cloud. In other words, the ADC follows the applications, right? So in this manner, right, when we help them with a new proposal, right, immediately, right, the justification was able to be made to the procurement team, and of course we won the deal, and even against competition, right? So this is the kind of benefits, and it's very powerful, right? Especially for customers with hybrid multi-cloud use cases. Okay, and I can't reference the name here, but of course, we do have a lot of customers that's on pool capacity, reaping the benefits, and we do have even telcos, right? And we have a large telco here in ASEAN region as well. They basically have 200 Gbps over 200 Gbps of capacity, and is deployed across over more than 25 appliances. And all these are in pool, right? And being a telco, right, they do require flexibility, right, in shifting and maneuvering, right, where the capacity actually requires to front the demands, right? So this actually frees up the restriction, right, of where fixed capacity licensing actually are presented, right? So this is one large benefit, I would say, for customers with pool licensing. Now, the next benefit, right, of course, right, if you look at the solution portfolio that we offer, right, is of course the monitoring, the central management and control, the analytics part, right, which is, of course, this is key to customer success, right? And that's where ADM, right, the NetScaler ADM comes in, right? So ADM basically allows the customer a single pane of glass across, right, all the NetScaler assets that they own, not just on-prem, right? It could even manage, right, assets, right, across multiple data centers and even across hybrid multi-cloud, right? So a lot of the use cases are evolve around using ADM, right, for automation, things like firmware updates, right, scheduling of configuration jobs, migration, things like that can be automated and done and scripted, right, on the ADM. Right. Of course, the other interesting aspects, right, is of course the using ADM more for the insights and the analytics part, right. First, for example, right, I would say one of the top use cases, right, for the ADM, for our ADM today, is in the monitoring, right, the analytics portion for the applications that the NetScaler is load balancing, right, is fronting. This is something very, very useful for customer because this allows the customers, right, to actually have insights. Now, how else can you know if your application is performing well or not? Since performance is a subjectable, right, metric, right? Well, some people may say, when I come to this website, it's very slow. Some may say it's fast. So how fast is fast? How slow is slow, right? And how do you know if the application is performing well? So there are scoring mechanisms that we put in place on the ADM that we can actually track the application health score. So it comprises of multiple matrices, right? In our computation, like, the way the applications response in our health checks, what kind of latency we are getting, things like that. All these will actually affect the application health score. And through the ADM dashboard, right, the customers can immediately have an overall view, and even they can drill down to the level of details, right? Like, what kind of response times, right? Or if this application is actually having a very poor health score, what kind of the issues this application is probably handling. And if you drill down, you can see things like server response time, right? What kind of error codes that's actually throwing out, things like that. These are just very, very useful for a very quick summary view, and also it can allow you to drill down, because not forgetting, right? Typically, when users complain of slowness or apps not working, if it's fronted by the load balancer, well, the network team gets the first blame, right? Right, the network team will get the first blame. Hey, it's a load balancer problem. But more often than not, right, it could be the server response time. The server is responding slowly, right? Too slow, it could be overload, things like that. So this actually unlocks matrices that are very, very useful instead of every time doing a TCP dump or NetScaler trace, right? Something very useful, of course, right, if you're using NetScaler for HTTP, HTTPS handling, which is again our key strength, right, at layer 7, you can actually immediately go into the web transaction analytics screen. Okay, now this is a very, very useful dashboard, right? So in a web transaction analytics screen, right, you immediately can see what kind of detailed transaction, right, that's been happening, right, over whichever period of time that you want to zoom into. You can see things like, it's a server throwing out server errors, right, like 501s, and is the response times badly affected because of the server slow response time? What kind of, and you can even go into the transaction logs, right, for every application that the NetScaler is actually fronting. And you can see in detail, right, the transaction logs matrices, right, like the app response time, from which source IP is coming in and things like that, which is the various slowness that potentially could affect, right, the so-called the user experience. Because not forgetting that the user is actually requesting, right, from outside. It could be, well, it's probably most of the time it's out of the data center, right? There's always the client round trip time, right? That could actually affect the performance. So client round trip time, right, basically, right, will measure the round trip, right, from the client, the user's device, right, all the way to the data center, right, or to the cloud, right, where the NetScalers is actually fronting. So that is actually a round trip time that we are interested to look at, because if that time is high, if the RTT is high, what we call the client RTT, well, it may not be the NetScaler problem. It could be due to the client side, right? Maybe the client is connecting from an internet cafe and the Wi-Fi is spotty. There you go, right? That will actually also affect, right, the RTT value. Now, if it's due to the poor server response time, you want to look at the server RTT, that is from the NetScaler to the server, and the server response back to the NetScaler. So this is something, two RTT values that we will often compare, right? And it actually is very, very powerful, because straight away, you know, and you have a rough idea, you know, now is it a data center problem? Is it a web server response time problem? Because we also track the server response time as well, not just network, right? But also the server, right? So all these are very, very powerful metrics, right? You can actually go on and take a look. So those features that we talk about, right, pertaining to analytics, it is not free. You can always position NetScaler ADM VIPs license or virtual IP license. So when you're constructing the BOM, right, if you want to position the ADM analytics benefits, right, do remember to also add in the ADM virtual IPs licenses, right? So that will allow you to unlock the analytics portion for every load balancing virtual IP that you want to enable the analytics, right? So this is something very useful. But for other non-analytics part, right, of the ADM, is totally free. I mean, you can actually use the ADM to manage your SSL certificates. Now, this is actually, I would say, it's a hidden gem, because tracking SSL certificate expiry, I mean, guys, is a pain, right? It's a pain, all right? I do have customers today, right, who are still using Excel spreadsheet, right, to track certificate expiry. I mean, come on, who uses Excel spreadsheet anymore, right? Excel spreadsheet anymore, right, to track cert expiry, right? Is no longer productive. Okay, so with ADM, right, you can actually consolidate and manage all the SSL certs which the ADC is managing. Okay, and you can use that to do a SSL certificate audit. You can actually immediately track, you know, which are the certs that will be expiring in the next 1 week, in the next 30 days, right, 90 days, you know, or have already expired. So you can actually use this to quickly do an audit across, right, the entire fleet on NetScaler that it is fronting. This is very powerful. Not forgetting that you can even define your security policies, right, where you may have a certain security standards, what we call the enterprise security standards, right? You may have a certain encryption algorithm that you need to enforce, certain key strength, key bits that you need to enforce, and things like that. And you can actually use the ADM certificate audit, right, tool, right, to actually flag out which are the certificates, right, have actually not met the company enterprise security standard, and immediately take corrective action on the cert itself. All right, and of course, you can also position NetScaler, right, not just in the traditional 3-tier architecture, right, but also in the cloud native stack, which again, this is something very, very powerful, because being a single software code-based company, you can actually deploy NetScalers, right, to handle the north-south traffic. You can use the traditional MPX, SDX, BLX, or VPX appliances. North-south traffic are typically traffic coming in, right, from outside into the data center. You can do things like SSL offloading. You can do WAF inspection, right? You can do authentication and things like that. Now, the interesting part starts to get in, right, when you are within the cloud native stack, right, like the Kubernetes environment, okay, where there's a lot of east-west traffic movement. In those east-west traffic movement, right, you can actually deploy our containers platform, which we call CPX, right, to handle that east-west. So you can actually deploy us, right, effectively in cloud-native stack, right? And of course, we work with a lot of platforms like the OpenShift, Rancher, right, Azure, AWS, and so forth. And the NetScaler engineering has actually invested a lot of efforts, right, in integrating with third parties observability tools, right? The Prometheus, the Grafana, right, Zipkin, and so forth, right? CI/CD tools, right? Cert management and service mesh control, plain like Istio and so forth. So there's been a lot of work already being done, right, in this area. So this is something that's very mature, and we are still heavily investing our resources on, right, to fit NetScaler as a very powerful deployment use case, right, in the cloud native stack. Okay. Next, I'm going to touch on quickly, right, is security. Right, security. Now, security is often an important component because in fact, with the latest changes that we have in terms of the editions, in the past we have the NetScaler Standard Edition, Advanced Edition, and Premium Edition, right? So since our end of sale announcement, right, we no longer already offer the standard edition, right, of the NetScaler. So we do have only today, right, the advanced edition as well as the premium edition. So with the premium edition of the NetScaler, right, immediately the customers has access to our web application firewall features. Okay, so customers today, right, with our premium edition license, right, they can actually deploy and enjoy the WAF modules, not just the WAF. In fact, they will also have access, right, to unlock things like bot protection or bot management. They have API protections, right? KBTs as well, IP reputation checks, right? All these are the security functionalities that's already out of the box, right? In our premium edition license. And together, right, this can be an on-prem deployment, and the customer can deploy our ADM on-prem as well if they prefer to, or they can. The other alternative for customers who do not want to do ADM on-prem is, of course, they can actually deploy what we call they can subscribe to our ADM cloud service. Okay, the ADM cloud service, right, is a subscription-based service called ADM cloud. In this case, right, the customer no longer required to deploy a full-fledged ADM VM. Instead, on-prem, instead they can deploy a ADM agent, right, which will act like a proxy and speak to the ADM, speak to the NetScaler's instances or appliances that are on-prem today, and through the ADM agent, right, you proxy the request and the analytics, right, to the ADM cloud service. So for securities, right, this is actually one way they can actually consume the security modules through the NetScalers that's been deployed either on-prem or in the cloud, right? Or they can also subscribe to our Matrix, our NetScaler web app and API protection service, right, which is purely a protection service that we offer customers, right, on the cloud without deploying anything on-prem. So this is something that is very, very powerful because we can actually protect like volumetric DDoS mitigation up to 12 Tbps of capacity. All right, so this is something useful for customers who needed the volumetric defense, right, against attacks, right, for DDoS, for example. You can actually position our web app API protection service, right? This is basically a SaaS service that you can actually consume without deploying any footprint on-prem today, right? Purely for SaaS consumption, right, for web application protection. And this is extensively covered over, we have over 14 point of presence, right, globally. All right. And next, I just want to quickly talk about the 5 advantages that you could position whenever you get into the competition. Right, let me just go through one by one. So first of all, right, I would definitely say I will stress on the single code base, right, feature, which is actually key to our technology, regardless of any platforms the customer chooses, right? MPX, SDX, VPX, CPX, BLX, right? All of them uses the same single code base. So what's the benefit, right? Of course, right? This allows customers to define a uniform security posture, be it on-prem or in the cloud, right? The same set of protection configuration firmware, right, is actually applicable across the entire fleet. Okay, so this is something very powerful, and they do not need to manage different different configuration from different vendors, right, so to speak. So this is something very, very powerful. Secondly, right, if you combine the single code base, right, with our flexible pool capacity licensing, right, which is designed a lot for hybrid multi-cloud customers in mind, then this basically free up the customers, right, from restricting, right, all the features and functionalities, right, to different silos that they actually subscribe today. Okay, so imagine, right, the kind of flexibility which customers can actually deploy, right, across different data centers, I would say, not just within a local data center across multiple appliances, but think of multiple data centers. Think of across data centers to even to cloud, right? Such capacities, right, can actually be maneuvered on the fly, right, with a zero downtime. So this is something very, very powerful, and I will strongly flag this up. If you're in competition, right, you can always position pool capacity licensing, right, as a unique value proposition, right? Now, thirdly, right, again, is our ADC consolidation pitch. Now, trust me, right, a lot of customers today do have deployments in NetScalers, right, in on-prem, in multiple zones, right? They could have two ADCs in DMZ, two ADCs in internal, two ADC in trusted, two ADC in VPN network and things like that, right? So I still remember, right, where customers, right, do not really wants to manage, right, across so many different zones, right, and they were actually looking at the benefits of consolidating them, okay, into single appliances, right, but yet able to provide the kind of secure segregation, right, for network level or security level zoning, right, and because why? Because by consolidating, it free up the number of physical footprint that they actually have to deploy across all the different zones, right? So one of the benefit I would say is by positioning SDX platform in terms of the ADC consolidation play, right? So you may have customers, right? If you realize that they are, hey, you're actually deploying so many different appliances, right? Across different zones. Have you thought about consolidating them? So you can actually position the NetScaler SDX platform, which is, allowing the customers to consolidate all the multiple physical footprints into a single pair, for example, and they can actually craft out different VPX appliances, right, running on that. And if you combine the SDX consolidation story, right, with pool capacity licensing, it's a winner, because then not only you allow consolidation into this SDX, right, you can even allow free deployment, right, by decoupling the instances away from the SDX appliances out of the SDX hardware, right, to other hypervisors or even to the cloud. Right, so this is something very powerful and flexible. You can consolidate, and yet it's very flexible if you were to combine with pool capacity. Okay, the fourth point I will stress on is, of course, our ADM. So our ADM, right, is something that we have developed, right, purely, right, with NetScaler in mind, right, to provide customers with a single pane of glass across not just the on-prem workloads, but as well across the multi-cloud deployments. Okay, so many customers, right, may not be aware that the ADM actually allows flexibility, right, to access, right, manage not only on-prem, but it can also manage and have the same kind of visibility dashboard, right, and control for those workloads that they deploy or assets that they deploy in public cloud, right? So the benefit of ADM is definitely huge, especially when you are getting into the web analytics, where just now we roughly touched on the transaction insights you can actually look at. And also, if you deploy our web application firewall, you can also use the ADM, right? Which we have a module called the security insights, right? To show all the top 10 attacks, the various kind of attacks that has been going through, which are the application that's the most highly targeted, things like that, right? Immediately flag out on the dashboard. So this is something very, very powerful. And I also want to stress that if you are having customers on pool license, ADM is actually mandatory, right? You either deploy ADM on-prem as a license server, or you consume the ADM cloud service, right, as a license server. So if you are going with pool licensing, right, ADM is actually compulsory. And last but not least, right, of course, the fifth point, not forgetting our integrated app and API security. This is important, right? Because the customers not only today, right, may be deploying to handle the traditional three-tier architecture, they could be deploying us as API gateway, right? Also in the microservices environment, right? So the same ADC, right, that's being deployed, because we do have the same set of functionalities, features, right, across on the same firmware. All these are actually uniform. Okay. So next, I'm going to quickly just touch on, and probably this is a revision for some of us, right, is the use cases. If you can look at this slide, right, there are, pretty much these are what I would say the very commonly positioned use cases, right, for NetScaler today. Okay, so if you are in front of the customers, right, largely, I would say more commonly, these are the use cases, right, that we will be talking to customers, like the hybrid multi-cloud situation, where you can position the pool capacity licensing, right, so that the customer's investment, right, is not locked onto the on-prem access. Okay, and of course, there is always the SDX platform story, where you can position the ADC consolidation play, right, to consolidate all the multiple assets, right, into single multi-tenant SDX platform. And the third use case, right, is again our unique value proposition here, right, is to when you attach our NetScaler to our VDI use cases, right, where again this is something that only we can do, none of the competitors can do, right, is our HDX ICA proxy feature on our gateway. So this is something that you definitely want to actually position NetScaler for, right? Because as a HDX proxy gateway, right, we can actually do all the authentication, right? We can even activate WAF, right, web application firewall protection on the gateway, which a lot of our customers are enjoying today, right? Because after all, the URL is accessible over internet. The first thing you want to do is to secure that URL with a WAF. And what makes it even better is the same appliance that is running as a gateway can also unlock the web application firewall module to secure that gateway URL. So there's something very, very useful and important. Yeah, and you can definitely position premium edition NetScaler, right, for all your ICA HDX proxy use cases. Right. I would say the DR or BCP use cases are the very traditional ones. Of course, right, we are definitely in the requirements of, whenever customer says, I need a reverse proxy, right, I need load balancing, right, layer 7 content switching, right, this is something that we have been offered the past 20 over years, right, customers been using us greatly, and also global server load balancing, right, for multiple data centers or across multi-clouds as well. And of course, SSO. SSO is something that we actually have a AAA module on advanced and premium edition, right? Allowing customers to actually perform 2FA, MFA, right, Octa Samuel, and even like native OTP, right, out of our NetScaler appliances. So there's always the SSO use cases where you can actually touch on. And of course, not forgetting the protection, right, which our NetScaler offers us for web and API against DDoS protection, bots attacks, and so forth, right? You can position the WAF or our web app and API protection service. And last but not least, of course, is the use cases right around API gateway or microservices in Kubernetes deployment. This one you can actually position our NPX, SDX, or VPX for the north-south traffic, and then CPX, right, for the east-west traffic. So these are the, in quick summary, these are the, very, very useful, relevant use cases, right, that we have. Next, I'm going to touch on quickly on what kind of discovery questions that you may, try to ask the customers. And obviously, the point of doing discovery, right, is multiple reasons, right? You want to ask questions like, to find out their pain points. What is the problem that we are trying to solve here, right? What are the kind of problem statements that the customer is facing today? Why do they need NetScaler, right? Try to unlock that requirement, and find out, do they already have an existing ADC? What is the brand? What they're using it for? How many data centers do they need to deploy this over, right? There are some questions that you need to ask. Things for sizing requirements, like how many concurrent users you actually need the ADC to support. And concurrent users, I would say, is a question that is relevant for sizing for NetScaler gateway attached, right, to our virtual and desktop, because we do have our sizing sheet, right, for sizing the right appliance model to handle the number of concurrent users for HDX and ICA proxy. So try to ask those questions. And then, of course, is this load balancer going to be deployed? Or is it just for layer 4 or is it just for layer 7? Is this how many application servers is this for? Are these web apps? What kind of throughput are we talking about here? That is actually required. Because all this is going to come in when you do sizing, right? And of course, the competition, timeline. Do they have a budget? Okay. Are the customers already having a micro services environment? Because these are, very, very key questions that you definitely want to find out in your discovery session with the customer. Okay. For solution architecture, nothing crazy here, right? Because I just want to quickly just share. A lot of customers today deploy GSLB. Okay, now GSLB, I'm not going to talking in detail how the GSLB flows. That could be for another session, right? But I do come across questions like, since we have GSLB module on the NetScalers, do I need to sell a separate NetScaler just to do GSLB and a separate NetScaler to do load balancing? Well, the answer is not a must, right? In fact, more commonly, right, and so most of our customers perform two functions in one appliance. The same appliance, right, that you deploy for GSLB can also be the same appliance that you use for load balancing, right? So you need not separate, okay, the GSLB module, right, to run on a separate hardware. In fact, you can run both GSLB as well as the load balancing on the same hardware. Okay, so in terms of architecture, right, the most common, I would say, zone that NetScaler lands in the on-prem environment is basically on the DMZ area. Okay, you can look at more discussions around all this, right, in our community netscaler.com website, where you have a lot of these articles. Right, sizing quickly, right, for those who are new, because I do get a lot of questions sometimes from partners and even distributors, right, on how do you size a NetScaler appliance. What you're looking here, right, is a typical NetScaler data sheet. Now, I understand there are a lot of numbers here, right, but notice that the only mention of concurrent users, right, is actually mentioned only for ICA proxy or SSL VPN users. So you're not going to be able to find concurrent users, right, for web. Okay, for web, you will not be able to find. Okay, so how do we gauge then? I would say typically, right, we need to understand one of the sizing requirements I look at, of course, is the throughput, because as you can look at our data sheet, right, every series of our platform, right, is licensed by throughput. And by throughput, I mean our layer 7 throughput, which is also equivalent to our layer 4 throughput. Okay, so there's no separate numbers, unlike some competition. So L7 number is the same for L4. Okay, so I would say take the throughput as the first gauge. right? If you are doing ICA proxy use cases, look at the concurrent numbers as well. Now, if you are doing SSL, if the NetScaler is handling SSL, do look at the SSL transaction per second number as well. Okay, so that's something that you want to actually be mindful of. And the last thing, of course, is to be mindful of the scalability of the platform that you are recommending to customers, because every series of our platforms, right, the 16,000 series, the 59,000 series, right, the 91,000 series, for example, they each have a scalability range. Okay, so that's something you need to actually take into account. Now, bill of material, the interesting part is, of course, right, what kind of items you actually need to put up, right? Now, for the new NetScaler subscription, right, we for the NPX and SDX, right, typically I get most questions around this because this is a new license scheme that we actually introduced. Okay, there's only actually three components, right? The first component is the hardware, which is perpetual, right? And the second component is actually the hardware maintenance, which is the RMA, right? And the third component is the software subscription, right? So let's take a look at a quick example and you can understand. So if let's say you are positioning NetScaler NPX 9110 Advanced Edition, okay, by this, right, you will basically in your BOM construct, right, you have at least 3 or 4 items, right? The first item is you need to actually have the NPX 9100 appliance, which is the perpetual and will be owned by the customer. This is the first item you will quote. The second item is, of course, to attach that with the hardware maintenance for RMA and for support opening purposes, right? Today, we actually offer standard or expedite maintenance, right? Standard meaning equivalent to our Gold maintenance, and expedite is our Gold Plus maintenance. Okay, so these are already the 2 items. The maintenance, of course, is a subscription-based and renewable. The third item, right, is the software. In this case, right, you need to identify what kind of capacity and what's the edition that you are actually positioning for this platform. In this case, it's the 9110 Advanced Edition subscription. Now, noted that this is a fixed capacity. All right. So these are the 3 items, right? That's mandatory. And of course, the last one could be accessories. Now, if this is a 9100 platform, do know that it doesn't come with any transceivers. So you have to actually code in the transceivers as well. And you will probably want to also add in the second power supply. Okay, so in this kind of bill of material, right, the hardware appliance is perpetual and the accessories are perpetual. The part that's renewable and is subscription based is basically just the software, which is a fixed capacity, and the maintenance, right? So I hope that helps a little bit. And of course, with pool capacity, right, subscription is generally, well, I would say kind of similar, but it will start off, if you look at the hardware pool capacity model, right, you will also need to identify the zero capacity hardware model, right? And then after, the second thing you will attach, right, is actually the hardware maintenance for the zero cap appliance. And the third piece, right, will be the starter pool, right? The zero capacity starter pool. Every zero capacity hardware requires a zero capacity starter pool, right? It requires that. So you identify these 3 items, right? And the starter pool, right, will come with a pool of bandwidth that actually goes together with every zero capacity appliance. If it's SDX, right, that starter pool will also come with the VPX instances, okay? And of course, you are free to add on, okay, any throughput add on, and for bandwidth or any VPX instance add on that's required, as long as the starter pool is not providing enough for your requirement, okay. And for software pool capacity, right, in general, you can always look at the VPX starter pool, which is actually the 5 Gbps 5 instance starter pool, right? And you can actually add on bandwidth and instance wherever that is required. And or alternatively, you can actually look at the 10 vCPU starter pack, right, which is vCPU based for pool capacity. So these are the three different pool cap licensing. All right. Next, I'm going to just touch on on the tools and references that you can actually make use of. First of all, I think most of you, I hope you're familiar with the Partner Central URL, where you can actually get access to training, certification, materials, DOTI, quotation tools, and things like that, right? Sales IQ, this is also an area where you can actually get yourself trained up and enabled, where you actually post a lot of useful content, presentation slides, white papers, and so forth. We also have the tech support website. Sometimes I have partners asking what is the tech support number, right? Hey, dude, right? You can actually check it out here as well. And of course, enablement. This is something that you can log on to, enablement.citrix.com, where you can actually consume the contents for training purposes. Partner learning paths in our csmic.com website, formerly known as Sales IQ. And of course, if you require to do demos, right, you can also use our demo.citrix.com to create what we call demo out of the box, right, where we have preset demo instances and requirements, right, across from workspace to networking that you can actually make use of. And this is something which I heavily use on, because especially so, right, when we have so many EOS, EOL announcements, sometimes it's confusing, right? This is one of the top questions that I ask, right? James, which is the website that Citrix or Netscaler make the announcement on, right? Which is the firmware that's going to be EOL, which is the model that's going to be EOL, and so forth, right? This is the website. If it's not here, it means it's still selling. Okay, simple as that. Because I have people asking, hey, James, this model is not here. The 59 is not here. When is it going to EOS? Well, there's no EOS, right? It's still selling, right? Only appliances that we make the EOS announcements will be here. So for models that's not have any EOS or EOL announcement, okay, it's going to be continued, be supported for at least the next 5 years, because based on our product life cycle announcements, right? We first, in order to make a platform EOS or EOL, we first have to make a notification of change announcement. Typically 3 months before, 3 to 6 months before an EOS date. Once that product hits the EOS day, right, it will continue to be supported for the next 5 years until the product EOL. So anything that's not found here is going to be good to go for at least the next 5 years. Okay, so that's the assurance. And of course, the documentation website, which of course are very, very useful, and I personally also refer to many times. The tech zone, where you can actually find architectures, diagrams, references, and very good papers as well, tech papers. And last but not least is the Netscaler community website. You can get on and engage in our forum. All right, I think that's the end of my presentation. Kemi, back to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, James. All right. I think at this moment, we do not have any questions from the Q&A panel. There is one. James, there is one question in the Q&A panel. Would you like to address that?
Let me take a look. Or can you read it out to me?
Yeah. So why did Citrix EOS the smaller VPX licenses?
Oh.
VPX 25, etc. So
okay.
Yeah, so the partner is saying that they are selling many of them to smaller customers.
I see. Okay. Thanks for asking that as well. Unfortunately, I do not have that answer with me, but these are probably decisions that has been made after the merger has been done. So it's probably for strategic reasons as well. Yeah, it's probably for strategic reasons as well. So for those who are requiring VPX 25, right? I think the next best is the VPX 200. Yeah, you can probably look at. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, James. All right. No other questions at this moment. Okay. So thank you, James, for your time today, as well as the partners that is online for attending today's session. So We will look forward to meet up with you again next month on our next Tech Talk session in the month of June. So with that, I will wrap up and end today's call. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Kenny. Bye.